So we are going to go live. Let's see, clicking go live now, going live. And we are live now. So let's just give it 10 seconds and then we can start. I mean, at the end, you need to update the field. That's clear. But how we get there is what we don't kind of like. I mean, at the end, okay. Yes, so it's 3 p.m. where I'm located, so I think that we can get started. So hello everyone, welcome to this DevTourFest session. Our presenter for this session is Peter, who is a product manager of the SAP Process Automation team. And he will be talking to us about process visibility, which is a capability of SAP Process Automation and how it can help you track the performance of end-to-end processes by providing visibility and intelligence to processes within the business process project. So Peter, thank you very much for joining today, and over to you now.
All right, thank you so much, Antonio, and a warm welcome to everybody on the live stream. And if you're listening to the recording after the fact, a belated hello. So what I'd like to kind of talk about today is SAP Process Automation, but as part of this structure, I want to focus on one aspect, which is the process visibility. So as we know, process automation, combines capabilities of workflow and automation into a single product. But what's very unique about it is we make it available for citizen developers. So we're talking about a no-code solution. So SAP Process Automation is part of SAP's suite of no-code offerings, which also encompasses WorkZone and AppGyver. And I want to focus on the process visibility. So when people just ask me, what is process visibility, like kind of the elevator pitch, I usually say, well, the goal of any process is to reach the end, and that's great. But there's other constraints that you want to meet. And one of the examples that I think at least I can relate to right now is at the end of this month, we have Halloween and a lot of trick-or-treaters come. So if I were to order candy and I want it obviously by Halloween, October 31st, if it came on November 2nd or November 3rd, I'd have a lot of disappointed trick-or-treaters. So what I really want to emphasize is that if I'm getting anxious, hey, when's this order going to become? I want visibility to be able to track when it's going to arrive. And for instance, if I were the vendor and I wanted to make sure that I keep a happy customer, I want to make sure that I delivered on the promised delivery date. And this is really what process visibility does. It basically shows you the overall health of your processes. So you can basically have process performance indicators to track it and basically see if it's in line with their goals, and also take actions. So in the candy example, if I see that, for instance, I'm going to slip and miss Halloween, what I can do is maybe request overnight delivery to ensure that the candy arrives on time. So these are the concepts. So the big takeaway here is that the goal is to reach the end, but you also have other constraints, like I want to reach it on time. So with this in mind, I just want to kind of show you what actually process visibility looks like from an end user standpoint. Sorry, just refreshing some tabs here. So what I'm going to show first is really from an end user perspective what a process visibility scenario would look like. And then what we're going to do is just create one ourselves based on the demo that Archana had done earlier, and hopefully you're following along. So the first thing we see is the dashboard, and at the top we have filtering. So for instance, one of the things I could do here is I can put in the customer name, myself, or whatever expected delivery date, and it would filter based on this. So the interesting thing here is we have these tiles. You can rearrange these tiles as you see fit, which is really nice. But we see the open instances. So really with the open instances is really where I would look first. The first thing you look at is on track, and this means everything is running. So, 2 thumbs up here. Critical is bad. Critical basically means that it passed, or it passed a delivery date, due date. So one of the things you may be asking yourself is, well, how does it know whether something's on track, at risk, or critical? And we'll see this when we create it. But basically, you specify a target for your scenario. So you can use something like a static variable that this process takes 2 days or 2 weeks. It doesn't matter. Or what I think is very important is you can basically use a date that's actually in the context of your workflow. So for instance, expected delivery date. And what happens with this is that if you also, in addition to specifying either a static or a date field, you specify a percentage. So you can say, well, if 80% is used up on track, it goes into the at risk, and after 100%, it moves to critical. So that's how you can really control what instances are in these respective buckets. Some other tiles that you can see here are the completed instances, open instances. And what's nice about the open instances, you get an overview of which step they're on, whether it's at the approval, get order details, etc. Cycle time, that's very important, especially like if you consider order to cash. If you can reduce the amount of time in a number of days, this can translate to really, a big cost savings. Other things would be like canceled processes. You can see execution time. But what's important is what I can do here is I can drill down from any of these tiles, click on the numbers, and I can find out more information. So here we have all the instances and the status. And what I can further do is apply filters. I find this really good if someone calls you up and says, hey, where's the status of my order? You can just put in a value and get right to the specific instances. So let's just click on one, say this Franklin Enterprises, and we'll get even more detail. So here we can see information like, for instance, the path that the process took, and you can see the elapsed times. So of course, this being a demo system, we can see we're taking minutes, but reality is things like an approval or something. It could be done same day, or it could take 2 days or 3 days. So really what process visibility is really giving you this tracking ability. So with this little background in mind, I also want to, before we jump into actually building our scenario, I just want to basically talk about the first thing is that some management things that we need to do. So what process visibility works is the idea that every step in the process is triggering an event. So when you have a form, you have a form creation time, which basically means that's in your inbox. And then you have when the form was completed. So all these activities are forwarding events. And here what we can see is the process visibility is processing the events. So what we can see is the interval here is it's running every 5 minutes. And what you would need to do is you would need to schedule the job. So to turn this on, and it would start collecting the events. Now, I just want to also show you in the monitor tab, we can see the acquired events. And just let me move this out of the way here. what we can do is filter. So you can do it on process definition ID, instance ID. I'm just going to use timestamp. So I'm clicking on timestamp and I click on the little calendar icon and I want to see all the events, through this time period. And here you can see the events. So the process definition ID identifies the process, the instance of what's running, the event type. So for instance, we can see the workflow task created, was completed, all this, and also a timestamp. And what we do in terms of process visibility is we take these events, we augment it with the contextual data, the data that's used in your process to create those dashboards. So with this in mind, let's go to our business partner approval process that Archana walked you through earlier. Now, the first thing we need to do, of course, is have a process. And then what you can do is click anywhere here in the gray area, and you'll notice this visibility. So if we click on the visibility, what we basically have is attributes. I just created 3 ahead of time, but we can easily remove them. If I want to add new attributes, let me just kind of move this out of the way. You just click on the attributes here. You can see the labels. You can add more. Let me actually go to the editable version as opposed to the deployed. Okay, so now we click on the visibility and now you see the plus icon. So we can basically pick, several first name, last name, organization. And let's kind of basically, I'm just going to take some other fields like, for instance, requested by, and you'll see momentarily why. And we'll also take another field that's called members. I just want a numeric data type as well. So I'm going to save this.
Peter, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
So I see that you have an approved business partner and block there, and then there's the approve and reject. But when you're selecting the visibility attributes, I don't know if it was added already, but in the plus button, like, do we get the status out of that action? Because I see there, no, the top one. So you have comments from approver. Mm-hmm. What about the actual decision itself? So was it approved or rejected? How can I get that?
Well, you'll see, because that's coming. Each one is going to, the status, what you'll see is really dependent. For instance, if it's rejected, then what's going to happen is the next activity in the branching. So we have the approval step here. What you're going to see is if it's approved, you'll see the events from this activity. If it's rejected, you'll see the events from this activity. So the status is sort of indirectly inferred by what comes next.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm, sure. So once again, what we're doing here is we're just selecting the attributes. And the idea here is, if you don't want to put sensitive information in the visibility, you need to worry about, there is an authorization object, but you can basically work with the process context and the attributes, and this will be augmented with the events that we were just kind of talking about. So with this in mind, let's go back to the overview. And now we're actually going to create our process visibility scenario. So I just click on this, we give it a name, and I'm just going to call it Z test, just being a little lazy. And what happens momentarily, we'll see the process visibility design time come up. So the first thing is, we have the general information. You don't need to really concern yourself, but you could actually give some scenario description. Then we look at the process tab. Now this is where we basically can click on the plus icon, and we have the different selections. So in my case, I'm just going to choose add process, but I just want to briefly touch on some of the other ones. And an observed process basically means, is it coming from a non-workflow system or not BTP workflow? So for instance, if you wanted to work with ECC, S4 data, or even third-party data, Now, if you are doing that, you'll have the responsibility of provisioning these events and delivering them to the process visibility APIs. And typically, you'll use Event Mesh as the middleware to do kind of like a pub sub type pattern to deliver these events. We also have BPM processes. So this is referring to the on-premise product, Qualtrics surveys that you can incorporate. And you'll see as part of our roadmap, you'll also see plans to also add business workflow. This is the ABAP variant that I'm saying. So we're just going to go with the add process, and this is the process that you were working on as part of this Devtoberfest. I'm just going to click on this. Okay, and let's see this. Just give this a moment. General. And I just, there seems to be just one small thing. I think, guys, I need to switch to another environment here. There's just something unexpected. Apologize for that, but we'll be able to pick up shortly. So.
Not a problem, Peter. You briefly mentioned APIs there. Can you, while you spin up the other instance, can you tell us a bit about the APIs? Are they available in the API Business Hub? Where can we find these APIs?
Yeah, primarily, if you look for the help documentation, it talks about how to basically work with this observed process model. But the key takeaway is if you're creating these BTP processes, the events automatically get provisioned. So all this detail is really underneath the hood. You don't really even need to concern yourself with it. So let me just kind of go back into my environment here. Okay, and I'm just going to take. So once again, and I apologize for any a little break in the process. So I'm using a different one, but everything I've said is still relevant, meaning that we still have sort of these attributes to work with. This is just a slightly different process. What it is, we have a form, an automation, a business rule, and based on that, we have an approval form and then approve or reject. So we're not, we haven't deviated that much. But let's kind of go back to the overview, and now we're going to create our process visibility scenario. And since I'm in a different tenant, this won't cause any problem. Oops, give it a different identifier. Okay. So we'll click, and I'm just going to add our process. Okay. Yeah. So it seems to be an issue. I apologize that it's normally what you would see is a list of all the events that are surfaced from the process and the context data. So the next thing you would do after we see this, we have this correlation. Now, correlation basically means if you want to join multiple processes together. So imagine if you had a process that's an S4, maybe it's using Integration Suite and then to Ariba. What you can do is join these processes together to get an end-to-end view. And this is done through a correlation. And the correlation would typically be like a business document number, the sales order, something that's consistently used or referenced as part of the end-to-end process. The next area is called phases, and we can create a new phase here. Just call it whatever you want. What phases are is it's grouping your project. Think of it like If you do any project management, you need to report on milestones. So these are major points in your project that you met. Phases is similar concept. It's really grouping individual activities into a larger bucket for simpler reporting. So what we can do is basically say with a phase, now we're working on the concept of events. So the first thing you have to do is say what marks that, a process instance is starting a phase and exiting a phase. So what we can basically see, and here's the drop down of all the events that are available for us. So we can basically say, well, when the process is started, and then we can say, well, when do you want it to leave the phase? And let's, in my case, I'm going to say, well, when the automation is completed. So so the process gets started and automation runs. And when the automation is completed, we exit this phase. Similarly, I can create a second phase, and you can name these whatever you want, and I would encourage you to name them something more meaningful. What we can then do is say, okay, now we're into the approval section. So I want to say when the auto approval is started and when the approval form is created. So this means that an approval form is someone's inbox, and then the end event is going to be when the approval form is completed. So the idea behind this is that we can basically measure how long it's taking for someone to approve something. So some managers might approve something same day or next day, and basically getting insight into this, you can basically see, where are potential bottlenecks. So once again, these phases are the groupings, and you can mark them with start and end events. The next area I want to cover is the state. So if you remember that tile that basically said, open instances. So normally, the state is that it's open. We can also say when it's completed. So once again, you can pick from the events. So it's automatically defaulting that the end of the process marks when it's completed. Another aspect here is abruptly ended, or it was canceled. So you can basically pick if any event really kind of marks that a process was canceled. So imagine, for instance, like in a new hire process, and one of the things could be that the applicant basically decided not to join SAP. It'd be a crazy reason, but it may happen. So you can basically terminate the process and by having an event that the employee rejected the offer or something like that. So this is really where we can get these states. The other thing which is really interesting is the status. Now, once again, the status is really, if you go back to that tile that basically says something's on track, at risk, or critical, this is where this is driven from. So the options here, we can have a constant. And if I pick a constant, we can say, well, this takes 6 days, 2 days, or whatever. But what I find is much more useful is using an attribute. And the attribute should be a date or a timestamp that's coming from your process context. And you would just basically put that attribute in there, and we can specify a threshold. So the threshold basically say when 80% of the target type is used up, it moves from on track to at risk. And of course, if it exceeds it, it goes into a critical phase. So that's sort of the mechanism behind that. The next area, and I'm just going to go with a constant for now, is the attributes. So one of the things with the attributes here is you see there's a lot of default ones that we can see. And here's our process context. And you can basically see things, for instance, we have like order amounts. I can specify this as a, let's say it's a double, and then I can actually use things like the aggregation type here, sum, max, and minimum. So you can get a lot of these things. The importance is interesting because if you remember from the navigation, we had the first screen, then I can navigate and then see a list of all the instances, and then I could drill down. So setting the importance really indicates where this attribute will be displayed. So obviously, the more important things you would put as key. The lesser important things where we can drill down to would be either significant or internal. So you can also create your own attributes. And if you also notice way down the bottom, we also have phases and cycle times and steps. This is automatically coming out of the box for you. What we can do is create a new attribute. So a calculated attribute, we give it a name. And here's really powerful. And this is one of the things that I really like about this product, because I think it's exceptionally well done, is because one of the things we can do is measure the duration between events. So going back to the approval, some managers may approve someday, some might take 2 or 3 days. Well, we can basically measure, how much time is taking for the approval step. But we also have a lot of different options. Imagine a more sophisticated scenario, like if we're doing sales order processing and you basically want to invoice, but typically you don't want to invoice unless you get a goods receipt. So this is where you can basically get really some nice insight, like for instance, event A occurred, but not event B. So, invoicing without goods receipt or vice versa. And if we look at this, it's really a very powerful way to basically get insight in the process by using these sort of calculated attributes. So if I said, duration between events, very easy. I can say, well, when the approval form was created and the approval form was completed. Very simple. So this is basically going to calculate the duration between these events. So the next area I want to briefly talk about is the performance indicators. So the performance indicators where we can use this different information, like for instance, we can just basically create a new performance indicator. I'm just going to call this Peter. And now we can basically say, what is the representation? You can basically say, I want it displayed in process visibility as a header, list, bar chart. So we have a lot of graphical display options. You have the instance. And now where it gets interesting is the measure. What is it going to be computed on? And what we can do is, if you remember, we could use order amount, and in this case, let's use order amount. What's also nice about this is I can apply various filters. So for instance, imagine I wanted to basically say, well, let's look at the attribute shipping country. And if I wanted it to equal to a value like USA. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a performance indicator that's basically going to sum up all the instances for any orders for shipping country USA. Now I could do similar ones for Canada or UK or India, as the case may be. But the idea is this really gives further insight how you can basically have these performance indicators and apply filters based on various criteria. So in addition to that, we can also create a second one. And in this case, what we're going to do is choose a measure. This was our elapsed time. And you can specify that as well as different attributes. But one of the other more powerful things, and I want to really kind of touch on, is this concept of actions. So with actions, you can create different types. Like for instance, we have navigational actions, but you're also, and this is going to be as part of the roadmap to be delivered this year, is you can also have workflows as actions. So maybe an example, kind of going back to our candy example, would be that if you basically sense, I'm going to miss the delivery, right? The promised delivery date is October 31st. So now it's at risk. We know that from the dashboard. But what I can also do is, I know these business exceptions occur. and I know how to handle them. So one of the things I could do is have a workflow to basically request expedited shipping. And what I can do is basically add this as an action to my dashboard. And that way, when I log on and I see this situation, I can basically say, this order is at risk, and I can remediate the process by basically clicking on an action, which is going to kick off a workflow for someone to approve the expedited shipping. And assuming that's approval was granted, then the order should arrive at the customers, and we have some happy trick-or-treaters at the end. So these are sort of the major concepts I wanted to sort of convey. But the thing is, what you've seen here is really very easy way to create a dashboard. It's measured in minutes, and it's a no-code environment, and a very powerful, with these events and how you can handle it. So with that, Antonio, I just want to see that we're almost out of time. If there's any kind of questions in the chat that we need to take.
Yes, there is one question by Rafael. Let me see. So it says, can we create statuses based on a combination of attributes? An example could be an inbox message that was read, but no timely action was taken. So creating statuses based on a combination of attributes. That's the question.
So if you're basically saying something is read, but no action is taken, so it's not, the task is never claimed. So we don't have a state there, but what you can basically say, yes, in your example, is the task was created, right? And you expect it to be acted on within, say, 2 hours or whatever. So you can basically, that's a non-event. So if you remember from the event choices that we were talking about here, and just let me cancel this, where we went to the attributes, we basically can say, yeah, event A occurred, but event B has not. So in your example, the task was created, but no one has completed it. So that would be perfectly, it's a perfect use case for this tool.
Excellent. Thank you. That's the only question that we have on the chat. So we know that we run out of time already. So thank you very much, Peter, for joining today. Thank you very much for sharing with everyone the functionalities that you can find in process visibility. I just want to take the opportunity to remind everyone that we still have 2 more sessions today as part of our DevTowerFest. So one of the sessions, it's Let a Bot Do Your Work for You, where we're going to talk about the robotic process automation functionality. And also there is a session following that one, which is Get to Know SAP Process Automation with a fun example. And that's a very interesting use of SAP Process Automation. Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, for sharing that on the screen. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you in the upcoming sessions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Antonio. And for those of you online or watching the recording, all the best. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Peter.mcnulty@sap.com. So thanks, everyone. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.